The jungle was alive with sound. Strange birds screeched in the tall alien trees, and unseen creatures rustled in the thick grass. The human explorer moved carefully, his boots sinking into the soft moss, his eyes scanning the shadows. He had heard stories of this place, a wild land where no human dared to walk alone, yet here he was, hunting for rare plants that could be sold for a fortune. The air was heavy, humid, every breath sticking in his throat like smoke. But he pressed on, his knife strapped to his side. He thought he was alone, until he heard it. A cry, faint but sharp, cutting through the buzzing of insects. The human froze, his hand tightening on his blade. Was it an animal, a trap, or something else? The cry came again, higher this time, filled with fear. His heart raced, curiosity and instinct pulling him forward. He pushed through vines, his arms scratched by thorny leaves until he reached a small clearing, and that was when he saw her. A girl, but not human. Her skin was pale with a soft shimmer, her hair silver like moonlight, her eyes glowing faintly even in the shade. She was young, fragile looking, and yet she was fighting desperately, because wrapped around her body was a serpent, huge and coiled, its scales gleaming dark green, its tongue flicking in and out like knives. The human's breath caught in his chest. The serpent was thick as a tree trunk, and it was tightening around her with every second. The alien girl's small hands clawed at the coils, but she could not break free. Her lips parted as she gasped for air. The serpent hissed, lifting its head, its yellow eyes fixed on her throat. She was seconds away from being crushed. The human knew he had no reason to interfere. She was a stranger, an alien, and his life was worth more than a risk like this. But then her eyes met his, glowing, wide, full of terror, but also something else, pleading. It was not a cry for help in words, but a silent command, a desperate hope. His chest tightened, he felt his legs move before his mind made a choice. He charged, pulling his knife from its sheath. The serpent turned, sensing danger, and its tail lashed at him, striking the ground with a force that shook the earth. He stumbled but didn't fall, his blade flashing as he slashed at the thick coils. The steel scraped the serpent's scales, sparks flying, but the blade barely cut. The girl gasped, her strength fading, her head dropping back as the coils pressed tighter. "Hold on," the human muttered under his breath, though she couldn't hear him. The serpent hissed, rearing back, ready to strike at him now. He ducked, the fangs sinking into the tree behind him, sap spraying like blood. The human slashed again, this time pressing deeper between the scales. The serpent roared, its tail whipping around, knocking him into the ground. His ribs screamed in pain, his knife slipping from his grasp. He struggled to breathe, the world spinning. And then he saw her again. The girl was still trapped, her body limp, yet her eyes found his once more. And in that moment, something strange happened. Her eyes glowed brighter like burning silver. Her lips moved though no sound came, and her hands pressed against the serpent's scales. A faint hum filled the air, soft at first, then rising into a vibration that shook the clearing. The serpent stiffened, its coils trembling, its hiss turning into a shriek. The human stared, frozen, as light spread from her hands into the monster's body. The serpent loosened, its grip weakening. The human scrambled to his feet, his knife back in his hand, his chest burning with adrenaline. This was his chance. He plunged the blade deep, into the creature's flesh, right where her light had cracked its scales. The serpent screamed, thrashing wildly, the girl falling to the ground free at last. The human grabbed her, pulling her out of the coils as the beast writhed in pain. Its tail smashed against trees. Branches snapped. The ground shook. He dragged her to safety, both of them gasping. For air for a moment all was chaos, the serpent twisting in fury, its massive body tearing through the clearing. The girl clung weakly to him, her glowing eyes fading as she whispered something he couldn't understand. But her voice was enough, soft and trembling, a reminder that she was alive. The human held her close, his heart pounding, knowing the fight was not yet over. The serpent was still alive, and now its rage was fixed on him. Its head rose above the trees, its eyes burning with hunger and fury. The human tightened his grip on the knife, his body trembling but ready. This was no longer about plants, money, or survival. This was about a choice he could not turn back from. He had stepped into the jungle to search for fortune. Instead, he had found a battle for life, and it had only just begun. The serpent's head loomed above them, its yellow eyes glowing like molten fire. The human stood with the girl behind him, his knife trembling in his grip, his chest still burning from the blow of the creature's tail. He knew this fight was far from over, and now the beast's hunger was aimed at him. The ground shook as the serpent slid closer, its coils crushing plants and snapping trees like twigs. Its hiss filled the jungle, long and sharp, like the scream of metal tearing apart. The girl whispered something, her voice weak, her glowing eyes dimming as she clutched her chest. The human didn't understand her words, but he understood her meaning. She wanted him to run, but he couldn't. Not when she had saved him just moments before. Not when those glowing eyes had begged him to fight. His hands shook, yet his feet dug into the ground, refusing to move back. The serpent lunged, faster than he expected, its mouth wide, fangs dripping with venom that hissed. When it hit the dirt, he rolled aside, the air whistling as the fangs missed him by inches. The ground where he had stood burned, the soil smoking. One bite and he would be finished. The serpent reared up again, and this time its tail whipped around, striking his shoulder. The human cried out, pain exploding through his arm as he was hurled across the clearing. He hit the ground hard, his knife flying from his grip. His vision blurred, his chest heavy, but he forced himself to rise. The serpent was already turning back, slithering toward the girl, who was too weak to move. Her glowing hands twitched, but no power came. The human's blood turned cold. He scrambled on hands and knees, searching desperately for his weapon in the grass. The serpent lowered its head, tongue flicking over her face as if tasting her fear. Her eyes shut tight, her body trembling. The human's hand closed around the knife. He gripped it so hard his knuckles turned white. With a roar that tore his throat, he charged. The serpent's head swung toward him, striking like lightning. He threw himself forward, stabbing upward with all his strength. The blade sank into soft flesh beneath the jaw, hot blood spraying across his arm. The serpent shrieked, its massive body thrashing violently, sending shockwaves through the ground. The human held on, the knife buried deep, refusing to let go even as the beast shook him like a rag doll. The world spun around him. Trees blurred, sky and earth flipped, but his grip did not break. The serpent slammed its head into the ground, crushing him beneath its weight. The air rushed from his lungs, his bones screaming. He gasped for air. Vision fading, but then he felt it. A small hand against his back, weak but steady. The alien girl had crawled toward him, her glowing fingers pressing into his skin. And suddenly he felt warmth. A surge of strength flowed through him, sharp and burning like fire in his veins. His eyes widened, his body no longer heavy. The girl's glow poured into him, her power becoming his. He roared, lifting the knife with renewed force, twisting it deeper into the serpent's flesh. The monster writhed, its hiss becoming a broken scream, its coils lashing wildly. Trees snapped, vines tore. The jungle itself seemed to cry out. But the human did not stop. He drove the blade again and again, each strike harder than the last, fueled by the strange power inside him. The serpent thrashed one final time, flinging him and the girl across the clearing. They rolled, dirt and leaves clinging to their skin, until they came to a stop near a fallen tree. The human coughed, his body battered, his knife dripping dark blood. The serpent's head crashed to the ground, but it was not dead. Its yellow eyes burned with fury, its body trembling as it pulled itself back up. The girl lay beside him, breathing heavily, her glow now faint. She looked at him with tired eyes, whispering in a language he didn't know, but he understood anyway. Don't give up. The human staggered to his feet, his body aching, his arm bleeding. The serpent rose once more, scarred but alive, its hiss shaking the air. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. The human tightened his grip on the knife, his heart beating louder than the serpent's roar. He stood between the girl and the beast, his legs shaking but firm. He had no plan, no armor, no strength left of his own. Only a blade, and the strange power the girl had given him. The serpent lunged, the ground exploding beneath its weight. And the human met it head-on, his scream echoing through the jungle. The battle for survival had only just begun. The serpent towered over them, its body scarred from the human's desperate strikes, its hiss rumbling like thunder. The human gripped his knife tighter, though his arm shook from pain and exhaustion. The alien girl lay behind him, her glowing, eyes half closed, her chest rising weakly with every breath. The jungle felt alive, holding its breath, waiting to see who would fall first. The serpent struck again, its massive head darting forward with lightning speed. The human barely rolled aside, the ground exploding as the fangs slammed into the earth, spraying dirt into the air. He slashed once more at its neck, but the blade bounced uselessly off. Thick scales. The serpent's tail whipped around, catching him in the ribs, and he flew across the clearing with a scream. His back hit a tree, his body writhing in pain, the knife slipping from his bloody hand, his vision blurred, his breath ragged, his mind whispering that this was the end. But then he saw her, the alien girl, trembling but rising slowly to her knees, her small frame shivering. Her silver hair glowed faintly under the alien moonlight, her eyes no longer weak but blazing with light. She stretched her hands out, her palms glowing like fire. The serpent turned, its yellow eyes narrowing, sensing danger. The human groaned, trying to move, but his body refused. All he could do was watch as the girl's glow grew brighter and brighter, until it lit the entire clearing. The serpent struck, its head darting toward her, jaws wide open. But before its fangs could reach, a shockwave burst from her palms. The air shook with a deafening crack. Light exploded outward like a storm. The serpent's body froze mid-strike, its coils trembling violently, its hiss choking in its throat. The human shielded his eyes, but he could still see her figure glowing like a star. The serpent writhed, smoke rising from its scales as her power sank deep into its flesh. Its massive body shook the ground, its scream echoing for miles. The human forced himself up, gripping the fallen knife, staggering closer. The girl's glow spread across the serpent's body, leaving cracks of silver light on its dark scales, and there, in one of those cracks, the human saw his chance. He leapt forward with a roar, driving the knife deep into the glowing wound. The serpent shrieked, its body convulsing, its tail thrashing through trees. The ground split as it crashed and twisted, the forest itself trembling under its fury. The girl collapsed, her glow flickering, the power draining from her small body. But it was enough. The serpent's coils loosened, its head smashing into the dirt, its yellow eyes dimming. For a moment, silence returned to the jungle. The human staggered back, chest heaving, his knife slick with dark blood. He glanced at the alien girl who lay motionless, her silver hair spread across the ground like spilled light. He dropped to his knees beside her, panic rushing through him. Her skin was pale, her eyes closed, her breath shallow. "Stay with me," he muttered, though he knew she couldn't hear. He placed his hand gently over hers, still faintly glowing. Her small fingers twitched, gripping his weakly. Her eyes opened, glowing faint but steady, and for the first time, she spoke words he understood. "You fight, like us," she whispered, her voice soft and strange. The human stared, his heart pounding. What did she mean, like us? Before he could ask, the jungle shook again. The serpent, though broken and bleeding, was not dead. Its body twitched, its head lifting slowly, hatred burning in its dimming eyes. The human cursed under his breath, grabbing the knife once more. He stood in front of the girl, shielding her with his own body, but then her hand touched his back, glowing faintly. He turned and saw her smiling weakly. Her eyes blazed one last time, brighter than before, and suddenly, he felt it again. The warmth, the fire, rushing through his veins. Her power flowed into him, her energy becoming his own. The knife in his hand glowed with silver light, humming like a living thing. The serpent hissed weakly, dragging itself toward them, refusing to surrender. The human raised the glowing blade, his body no longer trembling with fear, but burning with strange strength. With a roar, he charged, meeting the beast head-on. The serpent struck, its jaws snapping, but he was faster. The glowing knife pierced through its skull, sinking deep into the crack left by her power. The serpent convulsed, its body thrashing in final rage. Then it went still, collapsing into the earth with a crash that shook the jungle. The human stood panting, the glow fading from the blade, his body trembling as the borrowed power slipped away. He turned back to the girl, who had fallen unconscious, her glow gone. He dropped beside her, pulling her into his arms. She was light as a feather, fragile, yet she had held power enough to slay a monster. He brushed dirt from her silver hair, his chest heavy with questions. Who was she? What was she? And why had she given him her strength? The serpent's corpse smoked behind them, but the jungle was not silent. In the distance, the human heard footsteps, armored and heavy, moving fast. He tensed, clutching the girl closer. This battle was over, but another danger was already coming. And this time the enemy was not a beast, but something far worse. The jungle was quiet, but the silence was not peace. It was heavy, tense, filled with something unseen. The serpent's body lay still, smoking where the glowing blade had cut it. The human stood over it, his chest heaving, sweat and blood dripping down his face. In his arms, the alien girl lay limp, her breathing shallow, her glow gone, her silver hair clinging to his skin. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck, relief rushing through him when he felt a weak but steady pulse. She was alive, but barely. He lifted her carefully, her weight light, almost fragile as if she could vanish if he let go. Then the sound came. Footsteps heavy and many, moving through the jungle with purpose. The human froze, his heart hammering. He crouched low, pressing himself against a tree trunk, his ears straining. The sound grew louder, boots crunching leaves, metal clinking softly, voices harsh and cold speaking in a language he didn't understand, but their tone was clear. Hunters searching. The girl stirred weakly in his arms, her eyes opening just a sliver. She whispered one word, her voice cracked and broken. Run. The human looked down at her, her face pale but her eyes still glowing faintly. He tightened his hold, nodding once, though she could hardly see. There was no time to think, no time to rest. The hunters were close, and if they found her, they would kill him and take her. He slipped into the shadows, his steps careful but fast. The jungle was thick, the vines clinging, the ground wet and uneven, but he knew how to move. He had spent years surviving in wild places. He kept his breathing slow, his eyes darting left and right. Every crack of a branch behind him made his pulse race. He had never felt so hunted. The girl shifted against him, whispering again, her voice barely audible. They will not stop. They want me. He frowned, not understanding, but he knew enough. Whoever these hunters were, they weren't here for him. They were after her, and that made her more dangerous and more precious than he had realized. He moved faster, ducking, under branches, sliding down slopes, leaping over roots. The footsteps behind grew closer, shouts echoing through the trees. A beam of light cut through the dark canopy, searching. The human pressed himself flat against the ground, holding her. Close, the hunters passed just a few feet away, their armor gleaming faintly, strange weapons in their hands. He didn't breathe, his muscles stiff. One wrong move, one sound, and they would be dead. The girl's hand twitched, glowing faintly again. The light spilled onto his chest, too bright. He quickly covered her hand with his own, whispering harshly, "Not now." The glow faded, her head falling back, exhausted. When the hunters moved on, the human rose quickly. He darted deeper into the jungle, every step a race against time. But the hunters were skilled. They spread out, their voices calling, their lights cutting through the dark. One beam caught him. A shout rang out, metal boots pounding as they gave chase. The human cursed under, his breath clutching the girl tighter. He sprinted, his lungs burning, his legs screaming, but he didn't stop. Branches tore at his arms, thorns ripped his skin, mud pulled at his boots. Still he ran, guided only by instinct and desperation. Behind him, blasts lit the air, searing red bolts smashing into trees, the smell of smoke and ash filling his nose. They were firing at him now, A tree exploded beside him, showering him with splinters. The girl whimpered faintly, her arms clinging to him in unconscious fear. He gritted his teeth, rage sparking in his chest. He would not let them take her. Ahead, he saw a narrow ravine, its edges steep and covered in vines. He had no choice. He leapt, sliding down the side, clutching her tightly, rocks cutting his hands and arms as they fell. They landed hard at the bottom, his body taking the impact, pain shooting through his bones. But he didn't stop. He pushed himself up, stumbling forward, deeper into the shadows of the ravine. The hunters shouted above, their lights searching, their weapons aimed. He pressed himself into the stone wall. Holding the girl close, the ravine was narrow, dark, filled with roots and dripping water, perfect to hide if only for a moment. The hunters' lights passed overhead, voices echoing angrily. He stayed still, not daring to breathe, until the sounds faded. Finally, he let out a long breath, his body trembling, his mind racing. He looked down at the girl, her face peaceful now, her glow gone completely. Questions burned in him. Who was she? Why was she hunted? How had she given him such power? But there was no time for answers. The jungle had grown quiet again, too quiet. He knew they were not safe, not yet. The hunters would return, and next time they would not miss. He looked up at the glowing alien sky, his jaw tight. He had saved her once, he would do it again, no matter the cost. And somewhere deep inside he knew the truth. This was no longer just about survival. It was about her, and he would not let her fall into their hands. The ravine was dark, damp water dripping from the roots that hung down like broken ropes. The human sat with his back against the cold stone, the alien girl resting in his arms, her breathing shallow. He could still hear faint echoes of the hunters above, their voices sharp, their boots heavy, their lights sweeping across the jungle canopy. But for the moment, they were safe, hidden in the shadows below. The human closed his eyes, trying to catch his breath, every muscle in his body aching, his ribs throbbing from the serpent's blows. He looked down at her, her silver hair wet with mud, her pale skin glowing faintly even in weakness. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "Who are you?" The girl stirred, her eyelids fluttering, her glowing eyes opening just a little. For a moment she looked lost, frightened. Then her gaze settled on him, calm and steady. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice fragile but carrying weight. He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You saved me first," he said, remembering the light that had flowed from her into his body, giving him the strength to fight. She closed her eyes briefly as if the memory pained her. "It should not have happened," she murmured. "I should not have shared it, but I had no choice." The human frowned, confusion heavy on his face. "What are they after?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Why are those hunters chasing you?" The girl's lips trembled, her hands clutching his shirt as if afraid to speak. Finally she whispered, "Because of what I am." The human leaned closer, his heart pounding. She swallowed hard, her glow flickering faintly in her chest. "My people, they fear me," she said. "I was born with power to bend life, to break it, to heal it. It is a bloodline they want to control." Her voice shook, but her eyes burned with honesty. "They want me as a weapon, nothing more. They will never stop hunting until I am theirs, or until I am dead." The human's stomach tightened, the truth heavy and sharp. He had known she was special, but not like this. He stared at her, the silence between them thick, broken only by the drip of water around them. "And now," he said slowly, "because I saved you, they'll come for me too." Her eyes dropped, guilt flashing across her face. "Yes," she whispered. "You are marked now. You will never be safe again." The human felt a surge of anger, not at her, but at the faceless hunters above. He clenched his fists, his knuckles white, his breath sharp. "Then let them come," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. The girl looked up at him, surprise flickering in her glowing eyes. "You would fight for me?" she asked softly as if she could not believe it. He stared at her, his expression firm. "You gave me your strength. When I had nothing left, you trusted me. I can't walk away now." Her eyes widened, shimmering with something he could not name, gratitude, or maybe something deeper. Tears welled in her eyes, sliding down her pale cheeks. She had been hunted her whole life, seen only as a prize, a weapon, a tool. But here, in this broken ravine, a human spoke words no one had ever spoken to her before, words that made her feel like more than just what she was born as. For the first time, she felt safe. Above them a sudden crack echoed. The hunters' voices grew louder again. The human cursed under his breath, shifting to his feet. He pulled her close, whispering, "Can you walk?" She shook her head, her body trembling. But she gripped, his arm, her glow faint. "I can guide," she whispered. "I know paths they do not, secret routes, hidden ways, but you must carry me." He nodded without hesitation, lifting her carefully into his arms, her hand pressed to his chest, and once again, warmth spread faintly through him, not as strong as before, but enough to keep his legs moving. She leaned against him, her voice soft in his ear. "They will not stop. Not tonight, not ever, unless we fight back." The human's jaw tightened, his steps echoing softly on the damp stone. He realized this was no simple escape anymore. This was war, even if it was just the two of them against the hunters. He tightened his grip on the knife, feeling the dried serpent blood on its blade. His voice was steady when he whispered back, "Then we fight." The girl's eyes closed, but a faint smile touched her lips. She had found something she never thought possible. Not a protector, not a master, not a captor, but an ally and perhaps a friend. The jungle groaned as if listening, the hunter's lights cutting closer above the ravine. The human carried her deeper into the darkness, each step heavy with danger, but also with resolve. The truth was revealed now, and there was no turning back. They were bound together, by blood, by power, by choice. The girl whispered one last word before sleep took her again. "Together." And the human nodded, his eyes burning with determination. Yes, together. The night jungle pulsed with danger, the alien sky glowing faintly through the canopy. The human carried the girl in his arms, her weight light, but her presence heavy with meaning. Her head rested against his chest, her silver hair brushing his neck, her glow weak but steady. Above them, the hunters' voices grew louder, their armored boots thundering as they spread through the forest. The sound of strange weapons being charged filled the air, humming like predators ready to strike. The human moved faster, weaving between roots and fallen trees, every sense alive. With fear and resolve, he knew he could not run forever, not while carrying her, not against so many. His breath came in ragged bursts, his muscles burned, but he held her tighter. She stirred weakly, whispering against his chest, "They are close. They will not stop." He looked down at her, his jaw set. "Then we make them stop," he whispered, his voice firm. He reached a clearing, the moonlight spilling down like silver fire. The trees opened, revealing broken stone ruins covered in vines, ancient walls half swallowed by the jungle. The human stepped inside, pressing her gently against one of the walls, her glowing eyes watching him with worry. He crouched in front of her, gripping her hand. "Stay hidden here. No matter what happens," he said, his tone sharp. She shook her head weakly, her hand gripping his with surprising strength. "No, we face them together," she whispered, her voice trembling but determined. He stared at her, torn between fear for her and respect for her courage. Finally, he nodded, though his heart twisted. "Then together," he said, his voice low. The sound of footsteps drew closer, red lights flashing through the jungle, cutting across the clearing. The hunters entered, tall figures in black armor, their helmets glowing with cruel visors, their weapons raised. There were 6 of them, moving with precision, their voices sharp as they shouted orders in their harsh language. The human stood in the center of the ruins, gripping his blood-stained knife, his chest rising and falling like a drum. The hunters aimed their weapons, beams glowing with deadly heat. "Give her up," one shouted in broken human tongue, his voice metallic. The human's grip tightened, his voice steady though his hands shook. "Come and take her," the hunters fired, bolts of red light slicing. Through the air, the human dove behind a broken stone pillar, the blast striking the wall, stone shattering around him. He rolled out, charging at the nearest hunter with a roar, his knife flashing. The blade sank into a gap in the armor, the hunter's scream muffled by his helmet. The human ripped the blade free, kicking the body aside, but the others closed in, firing again. A bolt seared his arm, pain burning hot, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. He ducked low, slashing another across the leg, sparks and blood spraying. The jungle echoed with chaos, the smell of smoke and iron filling the air. Behind him, the girl raised her trembling hands, her glow returning faintly. Light flickered, spreading from her palms, wrapping around the human like a shield. The next blast struck him, but the energy cracked and bent away. He glanced back, his eyes wide with shock. She was giving him her strength again, even though it was draining her. The hunters shouted angrily, realizing the girl's power was active. They focused their fire on her, beams cutting through the ruins toward her small frame. The human's heart froze. He leapt in front of her, his glowing blade slicing the air, deflecting the blasts with sparks of silver light. He roared, charging into their fire, the glow wrapping around him like armor. The fight became a storm, red and silver clashing, stone crumbling, jungle shaking. The human moved with speed he didn't know he had, his blade sinking into armor, tearing through machines and flesh alike. One by one the hunters fell, their weapons clattering, their screams swallowed by the jungle. But each strike drained him, his body screaming in pain, his vision blurring with exhaustion. Finally, only one remained. The leader, taller than the rest, his armor thick, his weapon glowing like fire. The human stumbled, his legs weak, his blade flickering. The leader raised his weapon, aiming at the girl. Her eyes widened, her body too weak to shield herself. The human's chest filled with fury. With a final roar, he hurled himself forward, his blade glowing brighter than ever. The leader fired, the beam striking his side, burning through flesh. But the human did not stop. He drove the glowing knife into the leader's chest, piercing through armor. The light exploded, shaking the ruins. When the smoke cleared, the leader's body fell, his weapon shattering to the ground. The human dropped to his knees, gasping, blood running down his side. The girl crawled to him, her eyes glowing with tears, her hands pressing against his wound. Her glow spread into him, warm and desperate. "Stay," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please stay." He looked at her, his lips curling into a faint smile. "As long as you need me," he whispered back, his voice weak but steady. The jungle fell silent, the hunters gone, their bodies scattered in the ruins. It was over, at least for now, but both of them knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of something far greater, something neither of them could yet imagine. The ruins were silent, smoke rising from broken stone and shattered armor. The human knelt in the center, his body trembling, his side burned where the leader's weapon had struck. Beside him, the alien girl pressed her glowing hands against his wound, her silver hair falling across her face, her eyes bright with tears. Her glow spread into him, soft but steady, keeping him alive, holding him together when his strength was gone. The jungle itself seemed to listen, the night air heavy with the smell of blood and ash. The hunters were dead, their bodies scattered, their weapons broken, their threat ended. But this victory came at a cost, and the human could feel it in every aching bone. The girl leaned close, whispering, her voice soft. "You should not have fought for me, you should have run." He looked at her, his lips curling into a tired smile. "Running was never an option," he whispered back, his voice rough but steady, her eyes filled with emotion, a mix of sorrow and something deeper, something she had never allowed herself to feel. For so long she had been hunted, treated as a prize, never seen as a person, never protected. And now, a human had risked everything for her, not for power, not for reward, but simply because it was right. Her chest tightened, and for the first time in years, she felt hope. Then the sound came. Voices, human voices, echoing through the jungle. The human stiffened, his knife clutched, weakly in his hand, ready for another fight. But the figures that stepped into the ruins were not hunters, not enemies. They were humans, soldiers from an outpost nearby. Drawn by the noise of the battle, their eyes widened as they entered, their weapons lowering slowly at the sight before them. The human stood weakly, the alien girl still supporting him, both of them covered in blood and dirt. The serpents, corpse rotting nearby, the armored hunters scattered like broken statues. The soldiers stared, their faces pale with shock. One of them whispered, "By the stars, what happened here?" Another pointed at the girl, his eyes wide with disbelief. "She's one of them, but she's with him." The human met their stares, his body swaying with exhaustion. He tightened his grip on the girl's hand, pulling her gently to her feet. "She's with me," he said firmly, his voice sharp despite his pain. The soldiers exchanged uneasy looks, some raising their weapons again. Uncertain, the girl pressed closer to him, fear flashing in her glowing eyes. She had seen this before, humans and aliens alike looking at her as a danger, a weapon, a thing. The human sensed her fear, his chest tightening. He stepped forward, his body weak but his voice steady. "She's not a threat," he said. "She saved me and I saved her. If not for her, I'd be dead right now." The silence stretched, the soldiers staring at them unsure. Then one of them lowered his weapon, fully shaking his head. "Look around you," he muttered. "No human could have survived this alone. Maybe he's right. Maybe she did save him." Slowly, the tension eased, the soldiers lowering their weapons, though their eyes stayed wary. The girl looked at the human, her lips trembling. "They don't want me," she whispered, her voice breaking. He turned to her, his hand tightening around hers. "They don't decide," he said firmly. "I do, and I say, you belong with me." The word struck her harder than any battle, harder than the serpent's coils or the hunter's weapons. Her glowing eyes widened, tears sliding down her pale cheeks. For so long she had been alone, hunted, abandoned, treated as nothing. And now, for the first time, someone had claimed her not as property, not as a weapon, but as a companion. Her heart beat fast, her breath catching. She pressed her forehead against his chest, whispering, "Then I am yours." The soldiers watched in silence, stunned. Some shook their heads, in disbelief. Others simply turned away, unable to understand. But none stepped forward to separate them. The human held her close, his hand resting gently on her back. He looked up at the sky, the alien moon glowing high above. He knew this was not the end, that more hunters would come, that greater dangers waited, but he also knew he was no longer alone. Together, they had faced death, and together, they had survived. The jungle whispered around them, the night settling once more. The soldiers began to move, gathering weapons, clearing the ruins, glancing often at the pair who stood in the center. The human ignored them, his focus only on her. Her glowing eyes met his, steady now, no longer filled with fear but with quiet strength. "You fought for me," she whispered, "and I will fight for you." He smiled faintly, his body aching but his spirit alive. "Then, let them come," he whispered back, his hand tightening around hers. And for the first time the alien girl lifted her chin proudly, no longer just a hunted prize, no longer just a fragile glow in the dark, but a partner, a fighter, and something far greater. The humans around them were stunned, unable to understand what they had witnessed, but he understood, and she understood. And that was enough. The night closed around them, but within that darkness a bond had been forged, a bond of survival, of trust, of something deeper than either of them could name. And though the future was uncertain, one truth was clear: they would face it together.